Marcus Thompson adjusted his crisp uniform one last time before approaching the check-in counter at London's Heathrow Airport. The morning sun streamed through the massive windows, casting long shadows across the busy terminal. After 12 years serving as a personal protection officer for the British royal family, Marcus had grown accustomed to traveling discreetly, often accompanying members of the royal household on official visits around the world. Today was different. For the first time in years, Marcus was traveling alone on personal leave. His destination was New York, where his younger sister Emma was getting married. The wedding had been planned for months, and Marcus had specifically requested time off to walk her down the aisle since their father had passed away 3 years earlier. The airline ticket in his hand showed a first-class reservation, a small luxury he had allowed himself for this special occasion. The upgrade had cost him nearly a month's salary, but Emma's happiness was worth every penny. As one of the most dedicated members of the Royal Protection Unit, Marcus rarely spent money on himself, preferring to send most of his earnings to help support his mother and sister. "Good morning," Marcus said politely to the check-in agent, a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and an overly bright smile. Her name tag read Jessica. "I have a reservation for the 10:30 flight to JFK. Jessica barely glanced up from her computer screen as she took his passport and ticket. Her fingers moved mechanically across the keyboard, her expression gradually shifting from bored indifference to something that looked almost like disgust. "Sir, I'm showing here that there's been an issue with your booking," she said, her tone suddenly becoming sharp and condescending. "The first-class cabin is fully booked with our premium passengers today." Marcus frowned, checking his ticket again. "I'm sorry, but my reservation clearly shows seat 2A in first class. I booked this months ago and received confirmation." Jessica's eyes swept over Marcus's appearance with undisguised disdain. Despite his impeccable uniform and professional demeanor, she seemed to focus only on his skin color and working-class accent. Her supervisor, standing nearby, caught her eye and nodded approvingly at her hostile treatment of the passenger. "Look," Jessica said with exaggerated patience, as if speaking to a child, "I don't know how you managed to get this ticket, but first class is reserved for our important customers. We have several business executives and VIP travelers on this flight. I'm sure you'll be much more comfortable in economy class with people like yourself." The words hung in the air like a slap. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but years of professional training had taught him to remain calm under pressure. He had faced down armed intruders and handled international security threats, but this casual display of prejudice caught him off guard. "Ma'am, I paid full price for this seat," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. "I have my credit card receipt and confirmation email. There's been no mistake on my end." Other passengers in line behind Marcus began to shift uncomfortably, some pretending not to notice the confrontation, while others pulled out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a discriminatory incident. Jessica's supervisor, a middle-aged man named Brian, stepped forward with an ugly sneer on his face. "Sir, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone we deem inappropriate for our premium cabins. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable on a different airline altogether." The situation was escalating rapidly, and Marcus could feel the eyes of dozens of other travelers fixed on the scene. A family with young children moved to a different line, and several business travelers began whispering among themselves about the troublemaker holding up the process. "I'm not asking for anything I haven't paid for," Marcus replied, his military bearing evident in his straight posture and measured tone. "I simply want to board the flight I've booked and confirmed." Brian laughed mockingly. "And I'm telling you that's not going to happen. Security." He motioned toward 2 airport security guards who had been watching the interaction with growing interest. As the guards approached, Marcus realized that his years of service protecting some of the most important people in the world meant nothing to these individuals who had already judged him based solely on their own prejudices. The irony wasn't lost on him that he had risked his life countless times to protect the very institutions and values that these people claimed to represent. "Sir, we need you to step aside," one of the security guards said, though his tone was more professional than the airline employees. "Let's discuss this situation away from the other passengers." Marcus nodded calmly and followed the guards to a small office area behind the check-in counters. Through the glass windows, he could see other passengers being processed quickly and efficiently, including several who were clearly being upgraded to premium seats on the spot. Inside the office, Brian continued his aggressive stance. "Look, we've had problems with people like you trying to use fraudulent tickets before. I don't care what story you've cooked up or how you managed to get that reservation, but you're not getting on our plane in first class." The accusation of fraud was the final straw. Marcus had dedicated his entire adult life to serving his country with honor and integrity. He had been personally commended by members of the royal family for his discretion and professionalism. The suggestion that he would engage in criminal activity to obtain an airline seat was beyond insulting. "I'd like to speak with your manager," Marcus said firmly. "This treatment is completely unacceptable, and I want to file a formal complaint about the discriminatory behavior I've experienced." Brian shrugged dismissively. "You can complain all you want. Our manager isn't available, and even if he were, he'd back up our decision. Now, we can put you on the economy waiting list for a later flight, or you can find another airline. Those are your options." Marcus pulled out his phone and noticed several missed calls from an unknown number. His training had taught him to be cautious about unexpected calls, but something about the timing seemed significant. As he glanced at the screen, one of the security guards noticed his hesitation. "Having second thoughts?" the guard asked, not unkindly. "Look, I've seen this kind of thing before. Sometimes it's better to just take what they're offering and move on." But Marcus wasn't thinking about giving up. He was thinking about his sister Emma, who was counting on him to be there for the most important day of her life. He was thinking about the hundreds of flights he had taken in service of his country, always treated with the respect his position demanded. Most of all, he was thinking about the principle of the matter. As Brian continued to rant about company policy and appropriate passengers, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He scrolled through his contacts until he found a number he had hoped never to use for personal matters. It was a direct line to someone who had told him, more than once, that if he ever needed anything at all, he should not hesitate to call. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Marcus, is everything all right? You're supposed to be on holiday." "Sir, I apologize for calling you directly, but I'm having a situation at Heathrow," Marcus said quietly, moving toward the corner of the office for privacy. "I'm being denied boarding on a confirmed first-class ticket, and the staff here are making some very serious accusations about fraud." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, followed by a tone that Marcus had only heard a few times in his career. It was the voice of someone who wielded considerable power and was not pleased with what they were hearing. "Tell me exactly what happened," the voice said with deadly calm. As Marcus quietly explained the situation, he could see Brian and Jessica through the office window, laughing and high-fiving each other over what they clearly considered a victory against an uppity passenger who had dared to challenge their authority. They had no idea that their entire world was about to change with one phone call. The voice on the other end of Marcus's phone belonged to Sir William Pemberton, private secretary to His Majesty the King, and one of the most influential figures in the British establishment. Marcus had saved Sir William's life during a security incident 2 years earlier, and the gratitude had been genuine and deeply felt. "Marcus, you said they're accusing you of fraud." Sir William's voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to having problems solved immediately. "Yes, sir." The check-in agent insisted that someone like me couldn't possibly have a legitimate first-class ticket, and her supervisor suggested I had somehow obtained it through illegal means, Marcus explained, keeping his voice low as Brian continued his animated conversation with Jessica outside the office. Someone like you, Sir William repeated slowly, and Marcus could practically hear the temperature dropping in the conversation. I assume you mean someone of your background? That appears to be the case, sir. I've shown them my confirmation, my credit card receipt, and my identification, but they refuse to honor the reservation. There was another pause, longer this time, and Marcus could hear papers rustling in the background. Sir William was clearly taking notes, which was never a good sign for whoever had earned his displeasure. Marcus, which airline is this, and what flight number? British Metropolitan Airways, flight BM447 to JFK, departing at 10:30. I see. And you're currently being detained by airport security? Not detained exactly, sir, but they've moved me away from the check-in area and are refusing to allow me to board my confirmed flight. Sir William's next words were spoken with the kind of quiet intensity that Marcus had learned to recognize as extremely dangerous. Marcus, I want you to return to the check-in counter and wait there. Do not leave the area and do not let them convince you to accept alternative arrangements. Can you do that for me? Yes, sir. Absolutely. Excellent. Oh, and Marcus, you might want to have your phone ready to record what happens next. The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone with a mixture of anticipation and concern. He had seen Sir William handle diplomatic crises and security emergencies with surgical precision, but he had never been on the receiving end of that focused attention. Marcus returned to the check-in area, where Brian and Jessica were still congratulating themselves on their handling of the situation. Other passengers continued to move through the line, most avoiding eye contact with Marcus, as if his presence might somehow contaminate their own travel experience. Back for more? Brian asked with a nasty grin. I thought we made it clear that you're not welcome in first class. I'm going to wait here until this matter is resolved properly, Marcus replied calmly, positioning himself where he could see both the check-in counter and the departure board. Jessica rolled her eyes dramatically. Some people just don't know when to give up. Security should have escorted him out by now. What none of them realized was that at that very moment, Sir William was making a series of phone calls that would ripple through the highest levels of corporate and government power. His first call was to Lord Hamilton, chairman of the board of British Metropolitan Airways and an old friend from their university days. Charles, I need you to listen very carefully, Sir William said without preamble when Lord Hamilton answered. One of our most valued royal protection officers is being subjected to what appears to be racial discrimination by your staff at Heathrow. They've accused him of fraud and are refusing to honor his confirmed first-class reservation. Lord Hamilton's blood ran cold. British Metropolitan Airways held several lucrative government contracts, and any scandal involving discrimination could cost them millions in lost business, not to mention the public relations nightmare that would follow. William, surely there's been some misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Charles. This man has risked his life protecting members of the royal family on numerous occasions. He's traveling to his sister's wedding, and your people are treating him like a common criminal because of the color of his skin. As Lord Hamilton scrambled to reach the airport management, Sir William was already placing his second call to the Director General of the Civil Aviation Authority. Within minutes, a chain reaction was set in motion that would reach every level of the airline's operations. Back at Heathrow, Marcus watched as Brian took a phone call at the supervisor's station. The conversation started with Brian's usual arrogant tone, but Marcus could see the exact moment when the reality of the situation began to dawn on him. The color drained from Brian's face, and his voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. Yes, sir, I understand. Right away, sir. Jessica noticed Brian's sudden change in demeanor and hurried over to the supervisor's station. Marcus couldn't hear their hushed conversation, but he could see Jessica's confident smirk rapidly transforming into an expression of panic. Within 10 minutes, a procession of increasingly senior airline officials began arriving at the gate area. First came the airport duty manager, practically jogging across the terminal with his tie flying behind him. Then the regional operations director, who Marcus recognized from the corporate photos displayed throughout the terminal. Finally, a woman in an expensive suit who could only be someone from the airline's executive level. The executive, who introduced herself as Sarah Mitchell, Chief Operating Officer of British Metropolitan Airways, approached Marcus with the kind of desperate professionalism that comes from knowing that careers and millions of pounds are hanging in the balance. "Mr. Thompson, I am so terribly sorry for the treatment you've received today. There has been a serious misunderstanding, and I want to personally ensure that this matter is resolved immediately." Behind her, Marcus could see Brian and Jessica being escorted away by security personnel, their faces pale with the realization that their day had taken a very serious turn for the worse. "Ms. Mitchell, I appreciate your apology, but what I've experienced here goes far beyond a simple misunderstanding," Marcus replied. "Your staff made assumptions about me based on my appearance and treated me as if I were attempting to commit fraud." "You're absolutely right, Mr. Thompson, and I want you to know that this behavior is completely contrary to our company values. We will be conducting a full investigation, and appropriate disciplinary action will be taken." As she spoke, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from Sir William. "I trust the situation is improving. The PM's office has been informed, and several government ministers are taking a personal interest in this matter." Marcus realized that what had started as a simple request to board his confirmed flight had now escalated into a full-scale corporate crisis. The irony wasn't lost on him that the same people who had dismissed him as unworthy of first-class treatment were now desperately trying to contain the damage from their discriminatory behavior. "Mr. Thompson," Ms. Mitchell continued, "I'd like to offer you our sincerest apologies and upgrade you to our premium first-class suite for your flight today. Additionally, we'll be providing you with a full refund for your original ticket and offering you unlimited first-class travel on our airline for the next year." The offer was generous, but Marcus could see that this was only the beginning. Around the terminal, other passengers were beginning to notice the commotion, and several were discreetly recording the conversation on their phones. Social media would soon be buzzing with speculation about why a single passenger was receiving such high-level attention from airline executives. "I appreciate the gesture," Marcus said carefully, "but I think you should know that this situation has already been reported to some very senior government officials. The consequences of what happened here today will likely extend far beyond anything you can offer me personally." Miss Eyes, Mitchell's face went even paler as the full implications of Marcus's words began to sink in. She had dealt with customer service disasters before, but nothing that had attracted the attention of Downing Street and the Palace. As if on cue, Marcus's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a number that made his heart skip a beat. It was a direct line from Buckingham Palace, and only one person had access to that particular phone. The phone call that would change everything came from a voice that Marcus had heard countless times during security briefings and official functions. It was His Majesty the King himself, calling personally to check on the welfare of one of his most trusted protection officers. "Marcus, Sir William has briefed me on your situation," the familiar voice said with genuine concern. "This treatment is absolutely unacceptable, and I want you to know that we consider this a matter of the utmost seriousness." Marcus stepped away from the growing crowd of airline executives and airport officials, his training automatically kicking in to ensure the privacy of the conversation. "Your Majesty, I don't want to cause any unnecessary diplomatic issues over a personal travel matter." "Nonsense, Marcus. You've served this country and our family with distinction for over a decade. The idea that you would be subjected to discrimination while simply trying to attend your sister's wedding is deeply troubling. How is Emma, by the way? I remember you mentioning her engagement during the Christmas security briefing. The fact that His Majesty remembered a casual personal detail shared months earlier wasn't lost on Marcus. Nor was it lost on Ms. Mitchell, who had moved close enough to overhear parts of the conversation. Her face went from pale to completely ashen as she began to grasp the full magnitude of who she was dealing with. "She's well, sir. Thank you for asking. The wedding is tomorrow, which is why this situation has been so concerning." "Of course it is. Well, I've had a word with the Prime Minister, and he's assured me that this matter will receive the attention it deserves. I believe you'll find that your travel arrangements have been significantly upgraded." As if choreographed by an unseen director, a new group of officials began arriving at the gate. These weren't airline employees, but rather representatives from the Department for Transport, the Foreign Office, and what appeared to be members of the Prime Minister's advance team. The senior government representative, a stern woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Deputy Secretary Helen Crawford, approached the group with the kind of authority that made even the airline executive step back respectfully. "Mr. Thompson, on behalf of Her Majesty's government, I want to apologize for the treatment you've received today. The Prime Minister has asked me to personally ensure that this matter is resolved appropriately, and that steps are taken to prevent similar incidents in the future." Behind her, Marcus could see airport security officers escorting Brian and Jessica toward what appeared to be a formal investigation room. Their earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization that their casual bigotry had triggered a full-scale government response. "Ms. Crawford, I appreciate the government's concern, but I hope this situation can be resolved without creating an international incident," Marcus said diplomatically. Deputy Secretary Crawford smiled grimly. "Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid that ship has already sailed. The story has been picked up by international media, and the Prime Minister's office has been fielding calls from civil rights organizations around the world. British Metropolitan Airways stock price has dropped 12% in the last hour alone." The truth was even more dramatic than Crawford had indicated. Social media had exploded with video footage of the incident, and Dr. Justice for Marcus was trending worldwide. The airline's corporate communications department was in full crisis mode, trying to control a story that seemed to grow more damaging by the hour. But the real bombshell was yet to come. As Marcus finished his phone call with His Majesty, a black sedan with government plates pulled up directly to the terminal entrance. The passenger who emerged was someone Marcus recognized immediately: Lord Chancellor Morrison, one of the most powerful legal officials in the British government. Lord Chancellor Morrison approached the group with the measured pace of someone accustomed to dealing with constitutional crises. His presence meant that this was no longer just about customer service or even discrimination. It had become a matter of national significance. "Mr. Thompson," Lord Chancellor Morrison said formally, "I've been asked to inform you that the Crown Prosecution Service will be reviewing this matter for potential criminal charges related to discrimination and fraud allegations. The Attorney General has taken a personal interest in ensuring that justice is served." Ms. Mitchell looked like she was about to faint. Criminal charges meant that this could destroy not just careers, but the entire airline's reputation and financial viability. Government contracts worth hundreds of millions of pounds were now at risk. "Furthermore," Lord Chancellor Morrison continued, "the Cabinet has decided that British Metropolitan Airways operating license will be subject to immediate review. Any company that allows systematic discrimination against our citizens, particularly those who serve the Crown, cannot expect to maintain the privilege of operating in British airspace." The threat was clear and devastating. An operating license review could effectively shut down the airline's operations, costing thousands of jobs and billions in lost revenue. The executives gathered around Marcus now understood that they weren't dealing with a simple customer service complaint. They were facing an existential threat to their company. Marcus felt a mixture of vindication and concern. He had wanted justice for the discrimination he had experienced, but the response was rapidly escalating beyond what he had ever imagined. His phone buzzed with another message from Sir William. "Flight arrangements have been made. RAF transport will take you to New York. ETA at JFK, 6 hours ahead of commercial schedule." The offer of Royal Air Force transport was extraordinary, typically reserved for senior government officials and members of the royal family. It was also a clear signal to everyone involved that Marcus Thompson was under the direct protection of the highest levels of government. As news crews began arriving at the terminal, Ms. Mitchell made one last, desperate attempt at damage control. "Mr. Thompson, please, we're prepared to offer a comprehensive settlement package. Full ownership of first-class lifetime privileges, a significant financial settlement, and a personal guarantee that nothing like this will ever happen again." Marcus looked around at the chaos that had erupted from one airline employee's moment of prejudice. Media crews were setting up equipment, government officials were coordinating responses, and social media was driving a global conversation about discrimination and justice. "Ms. Mitchell, the settlement you should be concerned about isn't with me," Marcus said quietly. "It's with the millions of people who've been watching this story unfold and wondering how many other passengers have been treated this way when cameras weren't rolling and government officials weren't watching." The final twist came as Marcus prepared to leave for his RAF transport. Jessica, the original check-in agent, was escorted back through the terminal in handcuffs. The investigation had revealed that she had a history of discriminatory behavior against minority passengers, including several documented instances of illegally denying confirmed reservations based on racial profiling. Brian, her supervisor, had been terminated immediately and was facing his own investigation for enabling and encouraging discriminatory practices. The airport security footage showed him laughing and high-fiving Jessica after their treatment of Marcus, providing clear evidence of intentional discrimination. As Marcus walked toward the government car that would take him to the RAF base, his phone rang one final time. It was Emma, calling from New York with excitement in her voice. "Marcus! I don't know what you did, but it's all over the news here. They're saying you're arriving on a royal flight. What happened?" Marcus smiled for the first time that day. "Just a little trouble at the airport, Em. But don't worry, I'll definitely be there to walk you down the aisle tomorrow." "Are you in some kind of trouble? The news is making it sound like a huge deal." "No trouble at all," Marcus assured his sister. "Sometimes doing the right thing just takes a while to sort itself out. I'll see you tomorrow, and I'll tell you the whole story at the reception." 6 months later, British Metropolitan Airways would pay the largest discrimination settlement in aviation history. The company implemented comprehensive anti-bias training, established an independent oversight committee, and created a victim compensation fund for others who had experienced similar treatment. Brian was convicted of discrimination charges and received a suspended sentence along with a lifetime ban from working in the aviation industry. Jessica faced similar charges and was required to complete extensive community service with civil rights organizations. Most importantly, the incident led to new government regulations requiring all airlines operating in British airspace to maintain detailed records of passenger interactions and implement strict anti-discrimination protocols. The Thompson Protocols, as they became known, would prevent countless other travelers from experiencing the kind of treatment Marcus had endured. As his RAF transport lifted off from a military base outside London, Marcus looked down at Heathrow Airport shrinking below him. He thought about Emma's wedding tomorrow, about the 12 years he had spent protecting others, and about how one moment of standing up for himself had triggered changes that would protect thousands of future travelers. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most important battles are fought not with weapons or security protocols, but with simple dignity and the courage to demand the respect that every person deserves. His phone call had indeed made an entire airline go dark, but it had also lit the way toward a more just future for everyone who would follow in his footsteps.